Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming to tonight's very important evening of awareness. Seeing all of you here is an inspiration not just for me personally, but for the many people and organizations that dedicate themselves to this hard work. This is the first step to bringing much needed change that we all desperately are demanding. Before we begin the program, I just want to say a few thank yous to the people that made this happen. First and foremost, to my new best friend, Chesky Stern, who doesn't know the meaning of can't, won't, or no, and also has no concept of time. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tzvi Gluck. I'm the founder and director of Amudim, and I thank you all for coming here tonight. Then I would like to thank the event sponsors who without them we would not be here tonight. First off is another dear friend of my family for many years, Jack Jaffa, who also doesn't know the meaning of no, and Reliable Healthcare Systems and Ellie Goldbaum. Thank you all. And it's also important to mention our co-sponsoring organizations, all of which are at the forefront of dealing with issues pertaining to addiction, abuse, and mental illness. OHEL, and David Mendel, who's here from OHEL, thank you. The SAFE Foundation, headed by Ike Dweck. Unfortunately, we have to wish a refuah shalema to Rav Binyamin Babad, who wasn't able to make it, but sent his right and left hand to be here. Duvi, thank you, from Relief Resources. Our Place, the United Task Force, and the Flatbush Jewish Community Coalition. We have Josh Mehlman with us tonight as well. It's truly an honor and a privilege to be amongst the leaders in our community and having all of us come together for such an important, sensitive matter. The hope for tonight is to bring awareness to the community, specifically regards to addictions and how it impacts our community, our friends, our families, our neighbors, and people that we see in shul. The time has come that we, together, have to break the stigma associated with this, with people willing to get help, so that people can get the help that they need. All too often, we hear from people that they would love to get help, but it's going to hurt the family's name, reputation, business, affect shidduchim for their children, and so much more. This must come to an end. We have to all agree to stand up together and encourage those in pain to find solutions and help. Too many times we've had people literally choose death over life because they were too scared to get help. One of the stories I mentioned previously, and I'll say it again, we had a woman, middle-aged woman with kids, who contacted us for help with a very severe opiate addiction, which resulted after a very bad car accident. And when we finally did the intervention and met with her husband, parents, in-laws, and the family Rav, and we tried convincing her to go to rehab and explaining to her why it's important, her answer was, I can't go to rehab. If anybody knows, my kids will never get shidduchim. The therapist that was in the room looked at her and said, you do realize that if you don't go to rehab, your children may not have a mother. And her response to that was, if I die, people will feel bad for my children because they're Yisayimim and they'll get shidduchim. But if people find out that I'm an addict, they will never marry my children. This is what we need to stop. There's also a very big misconception that addiction is a matter that affects teens and people that want to party. And unfortunately, nothing can be further from the truth. Addiction affects people of all ages, genders, and backgrounds. We have clients at Amudim as young as 13 and people in their 60s and everything in between. Recently, I heard from a very dear friend of mine who's in this industry as well, who mostly deals with teens, that some of the parents of the teens that he's dealt with have said, at times, they wish their children would have cancer instead of having a drug addiction. Because if their children had cancer, people in the community would feel bad for them and want to help them and give them support. But being that their children are addicts, they're not willing to get that same compassion. This is what we have to change. We need to accept that people who suffer from addiction are ill. They're not bad, they're not evil. They need our help, they need our support. We also need to show support to the family members and loved ones of those who are suffering from addiction. We have to give them the chizuk so they can cope and be able to help their loved ones overcome the obstacles in ways that are extremely important and life-saving. Tonight we're going to hear from Harav Elya Brudny Shlita. He's going to give us divrei chizuk in dealing with these issues, someone who's been at the forefront of these issues for a very long time. And on a personal note, on behalf of the thousands that we've serviced, I'd like to thank the Rosh Yeshiva for all of the help and guidance. We're going to hear from Dr. Akiva Perlman, who's going to discuss the treatment options, both for the person suffering as well as for the family. It's important to note, as I said before, it's just as important to help the family and those affected as it is the addict themselves. We're going to hear from Dr. Norman Blumenthal, who's going to discuss some of the early warning signs identifying risk factors associated with addiction. And then we're going to hear for a few brief minutes from a fellow Ike, who's going to speak about his personal experience battling addiction and what he's been able to do to overcome it. After the presentations, we are going to have a Q&A session with the panelists. And at the far end, to my left and your right, we're going to have a naloxone training. Naloxone is a drug that reverses the effects of an opiate overdose. The medication will be given out for free after you get trained. Again, I'd like to thank everybody for showing your support for such a sensitive issue and for coming out here tonight. And I would like to ask Josh Mehlman from the Flatbush Jewish Community Coalition to come up for a moment.
First of all, thank you to Tzvi Gluck for spearheading this effort and so many more efforts around the country to help teens, adults, and everybody who needs help 24 hours a day, not just with Amudim, but for many years on every possible issue in the community. It's a zchus tonight to introduce my Rebbe, the Rosh Yeshiva Harav Elya Brudny Shlita, Rosh V'Rishon L'chol Dova Shebekadusha, who provides guidance and inspiration for Moistais HaTorah and organizations, I would say nationwide, but internationally at this point, Baruch Hashem. It's a big zchus to have his guidance for Amudim on a regular basis and for our community in Flatbush.